Hello everyone, and welcome back to Pyanodons Mods. This is Otaku Showboat, and today we'll be going over Vanadium. As per usual, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help make this series appear higher up in YouTube search results. You can also do all the social stuff through the links in the description below this video. So, it's finally arrived. Vanadium. We're going to talk about Vanadium, the one of the most notorious of the processing chains in the Pi suite in terms of its overall complexity. But after having built it out myself, yeah, no, it's not as bad as its reputation seems to imply, especially at the point in the game that you actually are doing it. Especially by the point in the game that you're actually doing it. Yes, by comparison to green science stage ore processing, yeah, it's a little bit more complex than that. But compared to other blue science ore processing, no. That the blue science ore processing as a whole is significantly more complex than anything even remotely close to vanadium. However, speaking of vanadium, I would be remiss to not at least mention, if you would like to get vanadium, all you have to do is set up particle acceleration. You need to make proton donors, which will require crystallographic substrate. The crystallographic substrate itself will require rayon and nichrome and cermet. Yes, rayon, nichrome, cermet, and like propene, I think is the gas that gets used there. So you need to make the crystallographic substrate. It'll consume rayon. You'll also need sulfur to turn it into proton receivers, as well as some chromium, and voila, you've got 0.15 per second per particle accelerator of vanadium oxide in the end. However, if you're going to do particle acceleration at blue science, why bother doing vanadium when you can just do diamonds through proton donors? You have to actually build out boron processing to make the proton donors, because they'll require crystallographic substrate plus boron, and you cannot particle accelerate for boron until purple science. Even though you get access to the recipe beforehand, but it's another matter entirely. You can get beautiful diamonds from graphite and donors. It's actually a lot of donors, by the way. It's 1-to-1 between donors and diamonds at the moment, at this very moment in time. And yeah, you can just do this and skip straight to purple science as long as you're mining uranium. You can just skip straight to purple science, so we're assuming that you're not going to go the route of particle acceleration going forward in these tutorials, which is why we are going to start with vanadium, because guess what? In order to progress towards purple science, you are going to need diamonds. In order to make diamond mines, you need special small parts. Special small parts are going to need super steel. Super steel, molten super steel, needs vanadium oxide. So we are going to begin with our vanadium oxide. So, what does this look like? Well, this is not built to ratio or anything like that. It's just a very simplified, pretty much just one building each along the whole chain. This will produce more vanadium than even 10 particle accelerators. It's going to give you a lot more vanadium oxide than doing particle acceleration, and it will consume significantly less power to do so, especially now that particle accelerators can no longer receive any number of modules for efficiency. You cannot do efficiency. None of the conversion particle accelerator recipes use productivity modules. There are additional recipes later on, like the diamagnetic material, that do absolutely use productivity modules because they are intermediates, and they need to. They absolutely need to, because otherwise they're really, really, really incredibly too expensive. So really all you can use is, well, speed here. And this has been implemented in such a way that even at Purple Science, when you get access to beacons, if you do efficiency modules and beacons, it will not efficiency beacon the building. It will not efficiency beacon the building. It will remain the 120, I guess 124 megawatts. But yeah. So it's set to max to be 120. That 124, I think, is a problem with the game right now, with how the tooltip displays energy consumption. I don't think it should say 124. I think it should say 120. I think it's, for some reason, adding the minimum draw of 4 when it's not operating, because right now this is currently drawing 4 megawatts just by existing. And then when it's running, it should be 120, not 124, but anyway. Outside of that, let's actually start this chain, shall we? So this chain technically starts with tin, grade 1 tin processing. We've already covered the ore processing for tin, so just bear that in mind. It's a very low, very, very low amount of G1 tin that's needed here to kick this off, especially at this small scale. So bear that in mind. We're going to start with Phytoplankton Farms, 4 of them, in fact, to feed into one Ziffo pool, or however the heck you pronounce that. It's hippos. It's hippos, or Ziffos. Hippos, Ziffos, whatever. Also, I've got some productivity modules in here, so do bear all of that in mind. You can't make the level 2s until Purple Science, but this is going to get you to Purple Science anyway, and you're going to want to go back and do productivity. Every single step here can use productivity, with the only exception being the filter recipe, because filters as a whole do not accept productivity modules. That is a building level constraint, although technically speaking it really shouldn't be a building level constraint. It should be a recipe level constraint for productivity for all of this, not building for that. Just because if everything else in Vanadium can take productivity, this should take productivity as well to make Vanadits. That's just a note to Pyanodon there. Even oleochemicals can get productivity. Even acid strip solution, which is only used here, can take them. So yeah, it's like literally everything involved in making Vanadium can use productivity, for the exception of the filter step here. So starting off, you need phytoplankton. Going into our Ziffo pool. Oh, by the way, let's actually look at the Phytoplankton Farm. The Phytoplankton Farm will require everything that you currently have. Storage tanks, steel, stone bricks, niobium, and circuit board 1s. The Ziffo pools, these will require Relesia plantations, as well as niobium and circuit 2s and small parts. By this point in the game, you are at Blue Science, which means that you have circuit 2s, as well as everything else listed here. So you can absolutely make all of these buildings. You can make all of these Mark II buildings now, in fact, if you have gone the additional step of being able to make advanced small parts, which is just logistics, by the way. If you haven't already started making advanced small parts, be sure to do so. This is nothing new. By the time you are at Blue Science, you have literally every single one of these ingredients. It's just the logistics of getting them all together to make the advanced small parts here. So you have all of that. And we're on the path to special small parts by doing this to make super steel anyway. So the Ziffos, it's some crustacean type thing, apparently. Like tube crustacean type thing, I don't know, but it's making it's making blood as well as wastewater. You can do stuff with the wastewater, but we're currently just venting it. This will give you blood. The blood is then processed into vanabins. Again, we can use productivity modules here by adding sulfuric acid. This is, shall we say, capable of processing the output of quite a few of the Zippo pools for one quenching tower. So just keeping ratios in mind: 4, 1, 5, 1. So yeah, 25, 1 here ish. If we're looking at productivity module 2s / 1s, because it's the same speed penalty for them. Anyway, the vanabins, also non-zero sulfuric acid. Oh, I guess I didn't mention back here, Zippo. There's one important thing that we didn't mention or talk about quite yet back here at Zippos before we move on. Tailings dust. These next 2 steps, actually, are tailings dust steps. Bear in mind, output is up to that, so it would be 1 to at least 2, if not 3 here. Just have a look at this tailings dust number here, if you're building at scale. Right now we've got 1 each, so 2 plus 14. Not quite 14, because it's, remember, it's 1/5-ish of this number, so it would be a lot less than 14 per second. So tailings dust is used in very large amounts as you scale up vanadium processing. So tailings dust is, of course, made from tailings. That is the primary method of getting tailings dust, and it gives you acid gas, which you can then make into sulfuric acid. So even though this process uses a bunch of sulfuric acid, your tailings processing should give you enough acid gas to give enough sulfuric acid for this process, ideally, or at least offset it dramatically. And bear in mind, again, you can absolutely continue using productivity modules for all of this. Also, stone into tar gives tailings dust. You can do iron into stone, and then take the tailings here, make it into more tailings dust. Take the tailings, take the coarse fraction, and you can use the coarse fraction to convert either back into more stone plus gravel plus iron oxide in a recipe to classify the coarse fraction, or you can add a little bit of coal to get additional tar. I would go the route of classifying this coarse fraction into stone, gravel, and iron oxide, and then loop the stone back in to this. And then the tar, well, the tar you can convert into saline water and more tailings. And at that point, you have a lot of tailings to convert into way more tailings dust than even this recipe will output. And that will also, because you're processing the tailings into tailings dust, give you a bunch of acid gas to give you sulfuric acid to feed this. So that's how you're going to probably want to go to make the tailings dust. So think of it as stone in, but I would also think of it more so as iron in. Remember that iron sticks can use productivity modules, as can this recipe for sand extracting for stone from iron sticks. So you can definitely be very productive about this and minimize your iron input. And because you're classifying, because you'll classify the coarse fraction, you'll get a little bit of iron back in the form of the iron oxide that you can just convert right back into plates and throw those plates right back into the sticks to make more stone. So you can actually... everything but the gravel can end up back as stone, which is fantastic. There might be a route for converting the gravel back in, but yeah, I would use the gravel for other things, particularly for stone wool, actually. So that's the tailings dust. That gets used here at making blue liquor out of vanabins, as well as in the initial Ziffo blood step. It is a lot of tailings dust, particularly here at the blue liquor step. I would actually say to Pyanodon, this is probably too much. This is probably a bit too high on the tailings dust on this particular recipe, especially compared to the Ziffo pool. I mean, if you're going to need like 3 of these to process one output of a quenching tower Mark II, and then it's 5 of these for the one quenching tower of vanabins with productivity, that's a lot of combined tailings dust to feed into this. Granted, that'll also be a metric F-ton of vanadium. By the way, if you, like, design just around the vanabins step here and scale everything up around the one vanabin, you're going to end up with probably more vanadium than you will use in your entire base for the rest of the game. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot if you scale in that way. But that's why we're keeping this more reasonable down at 1. So, tailings dust plus vanabins plus water equals blue liquor. This is where things start getting more interesting. So we have the blue liquor. One route, this first part is going into, eventually, the vanidates. The vanidates. That's part 1, is vanidates. So we create pulp 1 from blue liquor and steam, pulp 2 from pulp 1 and iron ore dust. Iron ore dust is the processing of, I think it's grade 4? Grade 1. Processing of grade 1 into iron ore dust. And then it's dust into pulp 1. Alright, so it's the next step after you get grade 1, which, remember that when you process processed iron, so it's iron into processed iron into G1, 2, and 3, and then 3 to 2 and 2 to 1. So this is like the final steps leading into your unslimed iron processing, well, pulp and slime into unslimed iron at green science. So you've had this if you did the green science level of processing for your iron. Yeah, so you should have that. This is indirectly consuming quite a fair amount of iron, because you have to think, well, how many iron plates is that actually in equivalent at the blue science stage when you could do high-grade iron processing? Like, how valuable is this 1.4 iron ore dust per second? Actually quite valuable. It's a very valuable, in fact. However, iron ore dust is also a byproduct of high-grade tin. So bear in mind that if you do high-grade tin, which, by the way, high-grade tin is locked behind, I think, yellow science for high-grade tin. Just bearing that in mind, the high tin mix, I think... Hold up. Tin processing. Yeah, this goes up to high tin concentrate, and then it is uh, yellow science for high grade tin. I just had to pull it up again. It's been a little while since I recorded the tutorial for tin. But yeah, high grade tin is a utility science, yellow science tech here. So just bear that in mind. You're only really going to be getting this from iron processing currently. What sucks here is that you have to actually process iron ore to get into the ore dust. You can't do iron oxide into iron ore dust. You can do iron oxide into iron plates, or you can do iron oxide into iron slime at a really bad ratio. It is awful. Never do it. It is not worth it in the slightest to do it. Its output is like at least 10 to 20 times too low by comparison to just making it into plates. It's just not valuable to you. But the slimed iron comes after ore dust is my point here. So you actually have to use ore. You're spending ore. But at Blue Science, you can get as much ore as you want by making drilling fluid 1 and ground boring for it. Moving on. This next step to do 2 into 3 is Ammonia Expenditure. It is Ammonia Expenditure here. A not insignificant amount of ammonia, mind you, going forward. Ammonia gets used twice in this whole process. I think sulfuric acid gets used at least twice for a few things. Yeah, twice, I think. So the pulp 3 then goes into pressured V-pulp. Just straight up converts pressured V-pulp in a pressure pump. And then down here in the filter, we add activated carbon. Activated carbon in here. Make sure that I got the just one building on all of these. To make vanadites. Now, vanadites. Vanadites will be processed into organic vanadate and vanadium solution. I'll call this red. This red solution. Or just red stuff. But it also requires vanadium concentrate and oleochemicals. Oleochemicals is nichrome, primarily. Nichrome, lard, and water to make oleochemicals. We've seen this plenty of times, so yet another thing that'll use nichrome here. But what about this vanadium concentrate? Well, that's back here. That's back here, and that's why we also have this. Because vanadium concentrate requires vanadium solution. This makes vanadium solution and requires concentrate. Yeah, so this is like a catalytic process, clearly. Clearly it is a pretty catalytic process here. This will take in hydrogen peroxide, industrial solvent, and chromium, as well as vanadium solution, and make vanadium concentrate and used solvent. Oi, I just sneezed. The used solvent can be converted into organic solvent. We've got 2 buildings here. Organic solvent and blue liquor. So here we've got blue liquor as well as some organic solvent that we really don't have anything that we can really do with at the moment. I guess you can use this if you want to make sure that you always use it. Just be sure that you're always using this organic solvent to keep the process moving. This gives you blue liquor, which loops right back into here to give you more vanadium pulp 1. Now, you may be wondering, well, how do we get an initial amount of vanadium solution? And this ideally, technically uses more vanadium solution than what this produces. Technically, it doesn't. Hey, Pyanodon. Actually, we need to look at the outputs here. So this is outputting 1045 for one of these buildings. This one building is using 933, so it's technically 1-to-1. I think that this is actually designed to be 1-to-1, but with productivity modules, you do end up with net positive vanadium solution here. That's interesting, because that is a loop that shouldn't exist. Okay, well that will probably be changed going forward. Just ignore that for now. Let's just ignore that for now. So the initial vanadium solution, the red solution, is going to come from evaporating blue liquor. Evaporating blue liquor gives you vanadium solution to do the initial feed-in. That's why I have this wonky setup with all of these underflow valves and such, just to make sure that we aren't completely backed up. But as we can clearly see, even that doesn't quite work, just because I'm using productivity modules, which is causing a bit of an issue here with over production. Slash it's... Alright, if I say this, it will definitely be changed by Pyanodon. So what you end up with is a net positive on the vanadium solution between these two steps, which means that as long as you build out enough of these buildings producing the used solvent, you're also ending up with a net gain of blue liquor infinitely, like infinitely gaining blue liquor through this process that cycles back into here to give vanadium pulp from nothing. Like, from nothing. Like, none of this will matter anymore because of this. And I'm pointing this out here so that this can be modified. You're either going to have all of the steps in this process use productivity modules, or you're going to have to remove the productivity from these. Like, these two steps need productivity removed if it's supposed to be a 1-to-1 on the vanadium solution here. If this is supposed to output the same amount as this one on the input, which we can remove the productivity modules and see that this produces 1333, this consumes 1333, makes 1333, needs 1333. So yes, without productivity modules, this is 1-to-1 and it loops back in, and you basically only do this recipe to produce the initial amount needed to make this cycle move. To make it go, pretty much. Alternatively, just remove the output of the solution from this. I mean, that's another option. You can just remove the output of the vanadium solution here, or cut it in half. That way, or less than half, actually, if you're using a very high mark level building and have the level 3 productivity modules, you can get over 50% output. So yeah, I would remove this completely from this recipe rather than remove the productivity modules from these two recipes in particular, because yeah, we're sort of, yeah, it's broken. It's broken! So vanadium chain, it's broken for now. As in, it's exploitable for now, but expect that going forward, this will change, especially since I'm going to point this out before the video goes live here. Anyway, moving on. Once you have your vanadits and your oleochemicals and your concentrate, that will be then used to make pregnant vanadium oxide acid solution. V2O5 is divanadium pentoxide, aka vanadium oxide, the item. So this is pregnant vanadium oxide acid solution. You need stripped acid. You need acid strip solution. This is used only here, and it needs sulfuric acid and methanol. It's pretty simple. One of these uses... Like, one of these buildings produces way more than one hydrocyclone can process, so bear that in mind. From there, we have Pulp 4. That also gives you a little bit of oxide 30% of the time. So 30% of this value here for one agitator, 30% of that, uses a ton of sodium chlorate. An absolute massive ton of sodium chlorate. Remember that sodium chlorate is twice that amount in salt, because it's 2-to-1 salt to chlorate before productivity, and is also steam as well. So just bear that in mind. A lot of sodium chlorate gets used here. Moving on, Pulp 4 goes into Pulp 5 by adding steam. Also has the 30% chance, or 20% chance actually here, of giving you vanadium oxide. Pulp 5 into precipitate, add ammonia to that, and again we have a 20% chance of getting vanadium oxide here as well. And then at the very end, we are making our glorious, glorious vanadium oxide. Over 1 per second if we're shoving in at least 7 of the precipitate per second, which one of these buildings is definitely more than capable of shoving in more than 7 precipitate at a time. So, and it gives you some tailings that you could cycle back into more tailings dust to feed this whole system. So that is that. If you add up the 0.2x there, the 0.2x there, the 0.3x there, and then the 1.18 there, you end up with like about 1.5. It's like about 1.5 if this was actually all running smoothly. But yeah, we can see that we've got full backups on all of these steps except for U, which is backed up because of that. So if I had additional agitators here, here, and more evaporators here, we can end up with a ton, even on the output of just the one Zippo pool. If we scaled up here, we'd end up with quite a bit. In fact, let's just do that. Let's do that live. Let's do that live. We're going to do a copy like so. I'm going to actually grab EU. This will just be steam at 165. And then doink, 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 doink. There, it's moving now. Grab you. Grab you. There. 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 Copy, paste, paste, paste. Oop, paste. Paste, paste, paste. And, paste, paste. There. There. Better. Better. So, look at all of these moving. They're all moving. They're all green lights here that we can see. Look at these beautiful green lights. Glorious green lights. You see how much vanadium that is? You see how much vanadium that is? Oxide? That's a lot of vanadium oxide, huh? That's a lot of vanadium oxide by comparison to particle acceleration. So with that, we have covered the vanadium oxide chain, folks. I hope you have seen how not bad it is, that the most complex part is right in here with this vanadium solution loop, just because right now it's actually broken. And it is a net positive on the vanadium solution, which also means that it's a net positive on blue liquor. It's net positive blue liquor as well because of that, and you won't even need this at all after the initial input, but yeah. So that will absolutely change, and so expect that to change in some way, shape, or form. My vote, of course, is kill the vanadium solution output on the organic vanadate step rather than remove productivity from these. But if you want to keep the whole catalyst thing going here, you just have to remove productivity modules from these two recipes. Removing the productivity from these two recipes will fix it. Otherwise, yeah. Anyway, with that, I would like to thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed today's video, please be sure to comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you are so inclined, do all of the social stuff through the links in the description below this video. Our next tutorial will cover aerogel. And by the way, just for reference, before we fully end things off here, what am I looking for? I am looking for molten super steel. What building art thou again? Advanced Foundry. So here, you can now officially do molten super steel because you now have vanadium. You have silicon and stainless steel and all of this you have. You can make fuel rods if you aren't already. You can make Mark 1 fuel rods through this recipe here, Nexalit Niobium Coke. You don't even need to make uranium powder for it at all. In fact, this is a joke. Ignore this recipe. This is just a joke of a recipe. It is 100% not worth it, the amount of work involved to get 70% powder. Similarly with even the 20 and the 40, just no. No, don't spend uranium on the Mark 1 fuel rods. Use Niobium Coke and Nexalit. But yeah, you officially now also have the super steel. You have super steel. Yay, congrats! You have super steel now. You have super steel now that you have vanadium oxide in really high, large, technically infinite amounts until this is fixed. But yeah, I hope to see you all on our next one, where we will cover aerogel into special small parts, because once we have the aerogel, we'll have our special small parts. It's going to be glorious. I will see you all then.